Hi, Dexter. Welcome to the fifth edition of the Data Innovation Summit. We are really glad to have you with us today. To start with, please tell us a bit more about yourself and your role at Shopify.
Hey, so thanks for having me. I started as a data scientist at Shopify for close to 2 years, and then I actually switched now where I'm a backend developer on a team called Shop, which our home team is actually in Stockholm, Sweden. So
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you presented on the machine and deep learning stage on the topic of finding bias in your systems. And as we know, bias, unfortunately, is a large issue for AI and machine learning. Could you tell us what are the steps with dealing with it?
yeah, so I think just recognizing it, I think a lot of people are kind of complicit in not even looking for it in their systems or believing that it's not worked into whatever they've built. I
Mm-hmm.
think so first, just recognizing it and finding the types of bias, and then just finding ways to mitigate it. So when you know that your system is biased towards something, you can try to actually like fix your model in some ways, but it always will have some sort of consequences because it's really hard to define kind of what
Right.
fair is. But I think just limiting the impact that like a model actually has is one of the biggest steps. And I think just like if a model really is being used for like really big factors in someone's life, like an
Mm-hmm.
example is like approving someone for a loan or something,
Mm-hmm.
that might be an indicator that like you need to do something very simple so you can understand every step of its decision, or it might be a good place where you can have a model augment like a human as well.
Mm-hmm. And what are the implications if bias is not tackled properly?
So I think like some systems there is like it will barely have implications.
No.
Others it can be a lot like larger. And I think for like being an industry, it's a lot more of just like, do you want a product that supports all users and is like inclusive and doesn't discriminate? Um, and that can, for some companies, that isn't a priority. Other companies, it is. But I think it really could like there's like so many things that could go wrong. You could actually just like segment out a lot of users that would be great for your product. But you could also just be like straight up discriminating and like have something that is doing something like discriminating on race or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And the implications of that are a lot more for a company because then it's you're getting into legal issues and things like
Right.
that.
So these are some helpful insights for taking with them. But what about avoiding bias? Can we avoid bias in machine learning models? And what are the precautions that have to be taken if we want to avoid bias?
Yeah. So I'm like a pretty firm believer that you never actually can remove all bias because
Mm-hmm.
someone is still making the decision of what is biased and what is not,
Mm-hmm.
and what is fair and what is not. So I think being aware of how models have this, there is techniques, like very technical ones, which like a few of them I talk about in my talk, but you can like debias word embeddings and things like that that help a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
it's very specific and it's very like if you go and you fix one specific thing, like you find you have like some sort of natural language model that's biased towards gendered words, you can go and fix that specific things, but then there's all kinds of words that are used from different, like if English is your first language versus your second, like the way you speak, like there's all kinds of ways your model will still discriminate. So there really isn't like a permanent fix for this. Like you have to keep actively doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And like most of the time, you like your organization will not like make money from making a model that is less biased. Like you could be the thing is that you could have a model that's like 95% accurate and the biases are helping it. And it's really hard to make a like business case of why you should remove that because it can
Right.
degrade the quality of your performance because lots of times models will kind of like pick up stereotypes that we do, and like stereotypes aren't always true, but it can still be hold true more for one demographic, so you still are making these predictions that are biased and it's helping your product. So it's really hard to sometimes understand when you should like actively try to remove these things, but I think it's like it's very hard to define, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't like being like I like don't consider myself someone that should be defining like what is fair and not fair. Like I think that that's where government policies and things like that need to come in to regulate models, because I think if you leave it to each individual data scientist to decide like what is the fairest and not fairest, that's a really like dangerous situation, because
Right.
everyone has a different idea of what a gray area
Right.
is. But I do think that it, like, just like engineers take ethics courses, data scientists, I think a lot of the time get away without doing that. If you did like a degree in mathematics or like computer science, you often don't take an ethics course. And I think sometimes it's so easy to get really excited about a problem and just like a prediction task and the data you'll use, like all these things, that sometimes you forget like what are the actual ethical implements, like implications of it.
Mm.
And it's just like, it's so easy, I think, for any technical role to remove yourself from the bigger picture. And I think that that's one of the things data scientists and just like engineers in general need to always focus on, is like, what are the bigger picture, like, of using this model, and what are the implications of it, instead of just like
Right.
focusing on the individual task.
Yeah, as you said, so, and there's always a gray area, so you cannot
Yeah.
always say which is which. But moving bias aside, let's talk a bit more about the recent developments in AI and machine learning. Could you give an outline of the most important developments in machine learning and AI, and provide your future outlooks of what we can expect in the next 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, very okay. So I think there's a lot of like, the last 2 years have really been like
Mm-hmm.
huge for natural language processing, specifically like looking at pre-trained architectures and leveraging them. We're following a lot of the things that have happened in computer vision already, where there's a lot of these mainstream models we can pull in. But now in like NLP, we have like BERT, we have like OpenAI is doing some of the like most interesting work on text generation, every model that they release. And I think a lot of people are very worried about like having these models that could write like fake news stories and
Yeah.
things like that. But I think there's a lot of really cool things coming out of it, like being able to just like, I think we still are like so far from having like models that you can, every like NLP use case is typically very specific. Like you're still training on a very specific task, and we're starting to get models that are just like really good at generally like understanding questions better and parsing that out of text and like creating structured data out of like text data. So I find that really interesting. But the other area that I like think is interesting is like work being done to debias models, and there isn't like a lot of work on it. Google actually publishes quite a bit of interesting stuff on it. But I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there. And I would like to see a lot more improvement, even just like tooling to actually find out when there is bias in systems. Because I think,
Mm-hmm.
again, like everyone's pulling in these like really amazing large models, but no one really understands like how
Yeah.
decisions are being made. So I guess, sorry, the keyword is interpretability. And I think that
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
again, like I think
A
the last
huge.
year it's been a really hot word. Like everyone's suddenly talking about it, where before it was just these black box models. But I think that it's a very tough problem. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
like so far from it. I have like no idea what the solution will look like, but I think that that's one of the areas we'll see a lot of growth in, because as these black boxes are starting to make their way into more decisions in our lives, and we don't understand how they do fully impact us, I think there is going to be more regulation, as there should be, on
Yeah.
how these decisions are being made.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for giving your insightful answer and predictions. It's really inspiring to hear some of the stuff. And that was our last question. And I would like to thank you for being with us at the Data Innovation Summit and for taking the time to do this interview with me.
Yeah, thank you so much.